everyone, and welcome. Some of the stories we have for you right now. A joint offensive as Canada's premiers and the federal finance minister tackle tariffs in Washington, D.C.
Markets hate uncertainty, businesses hate uncertainty, and all of us hate uncertainty. We need to get this deal done and move forward as quickly as possible.
How the message is resonating with American lawmakers.
Returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective.
A key phone call about Ukraine between the presidents of the U.S. and Russia.
So all the crews are ready.
Final preps as Eastern Canada braces for a massive storm.
They go up to the altar, they'd arrest the individual who was involved.
Plus, we hear from the hero who detained a church stabbing suspect.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
A very busy day on the tariff front. Canada's premiers went to the White House this afternoon, but had to wait in line like the rest of us and show their identification. The group of 13 is in Washington on a charm offensive, lobbying U.S. lawmakers to convince the U.S. president that tariffs will not only deliver pain to good neighbors, but to Americans. And Canada's finance minister and our ambassador to the U.S. also had a high-level meeting with the U.S. Commerce Secretary. CTV's Judy Trin is in Washington. And Judy, let's start with the premiers. I know there's only 12 of them there now who had trouble getting into the White House. They're there right now meeting, and there's a lot at stake, isn't there?
Absolutely, Sandy. And this meeting came together very last minute. They are only going to get 30 minutes of FaceTime with senior Trump advisors. So we know that they are on this charm offensive, as Premier Wab Kinew has said. The Manitoba Premier said this is about diplomacy. They're not going to talk about retaliation, but they are going to get their message clear across and directly to these senior advisors that are close to Trump. You know, for the past few days, they've been making their case to congressional leaders, Republicans in key states that are allies to Trump. They've been talking to business leaders, but they have not had that direct contact to say, you know what, this is going to hurt Americans directly. There are these will lead to job losses, but it will also drive up the costs. There are some policy think tanks that said the tariffs, 25% tariffs across the board, and these 10% tariffs with China could increase costs for American consumers between $1,700 to $3,000 a year, Sandy.
Okay, so tell us about that meeting earlier in the day that Dominic LeBlanc had also with the Commerce Secretary. That's pretty crucial.
That is. So this meeting took place approximately at 8 a.m. The premiers had a breakfast meeting, and they invited Dominic LeBlanc to partake. And what they did at that meeting was they gave Dominic LeBlanc a message to deliver to Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary. And one of those messages was, let's get some clarity. Are the tariffs coming? How do we stave them off? Now, I want you to remember, Sandy, that one of those things that was a sticking point in negotiations was how Canada was dealing with border security. In particular, the issue of fentanyl that crossed the border. Only 0.2% crossed. But Canada, Trump had wanted Canada to do better. And LeBlanc said, yes, Canada was doing better. We named a fentanyl czar yesterday. Take a listen to what LeBlanc said. He says now there is a better idea how the Trump administration will measure progress and give Canada a better idea how to stave off the tariffs. Listen.
We now have, I think, a good understanding of their process markers over the next number of weeks. And they were very clear that Canada very much has their attention, and they want to work with us to structure an economic deal that's in the interest of both countries.
You know, so what time frame is Canada working with? Well, in regards to that 30-day pause, that deadline is March 4th. So we have a couple more weeks to basically make the case. And this, as the Trump administration is elevating and escalating its tariff war against us, because they've also threatened tariffs on steel and aluminum. Sandy.
Okay, Judy, thank you so much for this. Now, Judy talked about Canada's new fentanyl czar, and he, in fact, will head to Washington soon. Kevin Brasso, who's a former Mountie, is tasked with making Donald Trump happy by tightening up security at the border.
Bringing that integrated approach, bringing the teams together, ensuring the collaboration, ensuring the communication is happening at officials level on both sides of the border in communities across the country.
And it all comes back to Donald Trump's demand that Canada stop, in his words, the flow of fentanyl into the United States. Now, there was also a huge moment today in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, a phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin this morning, after which the U.S. president said negotiations to end the war in Ukraine will start immediately. He also spoke with Ukraine's President Zelensky. Let's bring in CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon. And Joy, talk to us first about the significance of that call between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump.
Sandy, as one U.S. diplomat put it, Russia's president is no longer an American pariah. Now, this is after President Trump and Vladimir Putin spoke by phone for about 90 minutes, according to the Kremlin. They agreed to work together to end the war in Ukraine, setting up teams, agreeing to begin negotiations almost immediately. Trump's new defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, was at NATO in Brussels, and he delivered a blunt message to Ukraine that they'll have to make huge concessions for peace. Here's what he said.
We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. But we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement.
So a bit of information, Joy, about what that plan might be. But I know we got some more details from the press secretary as well. What did she have to say?
Well, the White House says that Trump informed Ukraine's President Zelensky of the conversation with Putin. Some critics see this really as a blow to Ukraine, that the U.S. may have given up too much leverage. After all, Russia did invade Ukraine, and that the U.S. and the Kremlin seem to be dictating the terms of these negotiations. And those negotiations, Sandy, actually will begin Friday in Munich. Now, the White House press secretary, she praised Trump's deal-making, and she said this about Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin.
I believe this nation views Putin and Russia as a great competitor in the region, at times an adversary, but as the president has said as well, he enjoys having good diplomatic relationships with leaders around the world, finding that common ground, also calling them out when they are wrong, and leading from a position of peace through strength.
Sandy, this is all part of Trump's playbook, pledging to remove America from foreign wars and entanglements. Trump and Putin also agreed to visit each other's country, opening a new chapter in Russian relations. Sandy?
All right, Joy, it's one thing after another. White House officials also shocked us with that tariff-on-tariff threat for aluminum and steel. Now we're talking about a 50% levy. The Prime Minister, wrapping up a meeting in Brussels with top NATO and EU officials, said that Canada will be unequivocal in our response. CTV's Rachel Aiello is traveling with Justin Trudeau. And Rachel, what are the next steps?
Sandy, Justin Trudeau has spent the past 5 days in Europe trying to strengthen ties with other allies in light of Donald Trump's threats. Yet the Prime Minister still doesn't have any plans to travel to D.C. to meet with the President.
In turbulent times, we all need reliable, trustworthy partners.
The Prime Minister is focused on friendshoring, but he's yet to put a trip on the books to talk to Canada's closest ally.
Have you had any conversations with him about you going down to D.C., trying to sort out your tensions in person?
We have talked about that. As you know, we have had many different conversations over the past many months.
Trudeau has been abroad since Saturday, trying to strengthen trade and defense alliances. But Trump, while not even on the same continent, remained an almost constant presence. From a brief interaction Trudeau had with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance on the sidelines of an AI summit,
it was just a quick greeting exchange,
to his meetings with allies, including those he had today at the seat of the European Council.
European Union and Canada also prove that trade agreements are clearly better than trade tariffs.
EU countries are grappling with the same American unpredictability.
Trust is very much needed.
Today, Trudeau also met privately with the NATO Secretary General to affirm Canada's commitment. The government has long been criticized for failing to meet its goal on defense spending. Trump has added a new sense of urgency as the U.S. Commander-in-Chief has his eyes on other countries' contributions.
If you look at Canada and would be cherished as a 51st state, they don't pay their share of military in NATO.
But Trudeau is leaving Europe, and there's been no change to the government's timeline for meeting the spending target, even with Canada's defense minister saying Trump's threats are concerning.
We will always stand up for our nation, our country, and we are not vulnerable to anybody's ambitions.
Trudeau's trip, one of his last as Prime Minister, is over. But Defense Minister Bill Blair is sticking behind for additional meetings with allies. Sandy?
All right, Rachel in Brussels. So what could be the most impactful snowstorm in years is hitting the eastern part of the country today and tomorrow as it moves through Ontario into Quebec before heading to Atlantic Canada with up to 40 centimeters of the white stuff and freezing rain in some parts. Canada's busiest airport, Toronto's Pearson International, is cancelling flights. Cities were in preparation mode all day, and police are advising motorists to stay off the roads. We sent CTV's Heather Wright outside to give us a sense of what's about to hit. And Heather, it's the calm before the storm, I gather.
It is pretty calm, Sandy. The snow has started to fall, but you can see we're at a City of Toronto Works yard, and it's pretty quiet right now. Not a whole lot of action happening here, but we know that cities like Toronto and communities right across southern Ontario have been preparing for this storm. The City of Toronto says that they have hundreds of workers and 1,400 pieces of equipment ready to go once accumulation begins, and it is expected to come fast and furious overnight. Here's a little bit of what the Director of Transportation Services here in Toronto had to say about the storm preps and what the city's doing to tackle the snow once it really starts to fall.
All the crews are already prepared, assigned to activate when they get called out. As a result of the fact that we will be getting quite considerable amount of snow, multiple rounds will be activated, which means you will see the equipment across the city throughout the evening, into the early morning, into Thursday, and into Friday. Okay, so it's going to take at least three rounds, if not more, to service all of the locations.
And the city is also saying because so much snow is going to fall and because temperatures here in Toronto are going to remain well below the freezing level through the weekend, they are planning to do snow removal. Now, that is not expected to take place until early next week, but sites are being prepped throughout the city for crews to go through and remove some of that snow because it's simply not going to melt on its own. But keep in mind, there is more snow in the forecast over the weekend. And so by the end of the weekend, by Monday, there could be as much as 35 centimeters of snow here in Toronto. And with this snow expected to really pick up over the overnight hours, people are being encouraged to call the airports if they have a flight to check that status. And also for families, a lot of schools in a holding pattern as to whether there will be a snow day tomorrow. Those calls expected to be made early tomorrow morning. Sandy.
I know it's winter, but I've had enough. Okay, Heather, thanks. Coming up, screening a troubling spike in cases.
Everybody here consents that the numbers are increasing.
Investigating a sharp increase in breast cancer, especially among younger patients. Cancer rates are rising among Canadians under the age of 50, and it seems our flailing healthcare system can't seem to meet their needs. And that's why it was alarming when an Ontario hospital recorded a massive jump in breast cancer diagnoses. We wanted to know why. CTV's Adrian Gobriel went to the hospital to get some answers. Adrian, what did you learn?
Sandy, sadly, the number of new breast cancer cases across Canada are on the rise. We're here inside Toronto's North York General Hospital today, where since 2019, the number of new patients has increased 166%.
Breast imaging centers like this one are now seeing more patients than ever before.
As a first-line worker, I'm very well aware of the increase in patients that we're seeing.
According to Statistics Canada data that excludes Quebec, there were nearly 21,000 new cases of breast cancer across the rest of the country in 2019. The Canadian Cancer Society estimates that number increased to 30,800 for 2024.
We know that during COVID, there was a less number of people being diagnosed with cancer. We now anticipate that we will see that number come in at a much higher rate and at a higher incidence of progression of cancers.
It's not just a higher number of new cases, but the age of many of those now being diagnosed.
The greatest number of increasingly newly diagnosed patients are the under 50-year-old patients. So we're seeing a lot of younger patients come through our center.
My sister and I were both undergoing breast cancer treatment at the same time.
In 2023, Robbie Spring was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 35, just weeks after her 43-year-old sister was also diagnosed with breast cancer. Both were tested regularly because years earlier, their mother had also battled the same deadly disease.
I just didn't want to call my mom. How can I tell her that she's actually has two daughters going through cancer at the same time? Like, one is a nightmare, but two.
Thankfully, Spring and her sister, as well as their mother, are all alive today. But for many others, the outcome can be tragically different.
The earlier that breast cancer can be found, or any cancer, the more treatable it is.
For Robbie Spring, she hopes her personal breast cancer journey, as well as her family's, serves as an awakening for women across Canada to advocate for themselves. Sandy.
All right, Adrian. Now, addressing the backlog of nurses would certainly help improve care, but it will take years to fix the problem. In Nova Scotia alone, the vacancy rate in urban areas for nurses is almost 17%. CTV's Paul Hollingsworth looks at one university's attempt to fix the problem. Paul?
Sandy, St. Francis Xavier University, located here in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, has found success and growth when it comes to graduating nurses in their two-year accelerated program. These students are part of St. Francis Xavier University's two-year accelerated nursing program. They learn in a collaborative, hands-on setting, using mannequins in a simulated hospital environment.
It's been pretty fast-paced.
Building that kind of team environment with your classmates.
St. FX also has a traditional four-year nursing program that takes students straight out of high school.
To qualify for the accelerated option, you do have to have completed some university level education previously.
The two-year nursing program began in 2017 with just 20 students.
Just over the last couple of years, we've been working really hard to more than double that.
There are now 48 students, up from 31 the year before. It's a tough academic grind, a nursing degree crammed into 24 months.
It's exciting to see this accelerated option grow because we know we're going to get these nurses out into the healthcare system much quicker. They're keen, they're excited, they're goal-driven.
They are motivated to contribute to the healthcare system and graduate in a compressed time frame when there is a tremendous need for nurses.
I am focused and passionate about making people's lives better.
To know that all of your hard work and all of the skills and all the training you're going to have is going to be valued in the community is wonderful.
This is also an idea that is catching on. There are several accelerated nursing programs across the country. It's an opportunity to fast-track these students, have them quickly graduate and become nurses at a time when they are desperately needed. Sandy.
Okay, Paul, thank you so much for this. Now, if you've been dealing with fever, chills, and a nasty cough, you're not alone. Public health officials say the flu is widespread in several parts of the country, and there's still time to get a shot.
And it takes about 2 weeks for the vaccine to kick in to provide full immunity. So if you were to get it now, you're still going to have coverage for most of February, March, and into April as well.
The latest data from the Public Health Agency of Canada shows widespread activity in parts of British Columbia, Ontario, and Quebec. Still ahead, off duty, but always on call. How an RCMP officer helped defuse an attack at his church. A frightening incident inside a Winnipeg church. A pastor attacked with a knife, but then an off-duty RCMP officer came to the rescue. CTV's Alex Carper reached out to the hero of the day, who agreed to talk to him. Alex.
Sandy, I'm just in front of the altar here at Holy Ghost Parish in Winnipeg, where a suspect allegedly tried to stab a priest during a service this past Sunday. Video provided by the church begins with the priest singing a hymn near the altar. At the same time, a man in a yellow jacket charges at the priest, who was able to escape. The suspect proceeds to stab the knife into the altar and sits down in a chair at the back of it. Off-duty officer Tony Zolodowski approached the suspect and detained him until police came.
I did go up to the altar. I did arrest the individual who was involved here, and I was joined by other parishioners very quickly. Luckily, nobody got hurt, and the service continued. The whole incident just transpired and happened pretty darn quick.
50-year-old suspect Pavel Olovnia is facing several charges, including assault with a weapon, and was detained in custody. Police say there is no motive at this time, and it's believed that he is not a member of this parish. Sandy?
All right, CTV's Alex Carpa. After the break, cheering on Team Canada, the homegrown pride, and a highly anticipated international face-off. For all the tension in the political arena right now between Canada and the United States, the two countries, along with Sweden and Finland, are about to face off in an actual one. The four nations face-off starts tonight in Montreal, and fans are ready.
Yeah, we were excited. They're all excited to see their favorite players.
My husband got me tickets for Christmas, and best Christmas gift that he ever got me.
Connor McDavid and some other Canadian players skated this morning. Team Canada's Sidney Crosby says they are embracing the pressure.
Ultimately, you want to be part of these big games. So, yeah, I think there's always a little bit of anticipation, butterflies, all those things. But, you know, that's what makes them great.
This is the first time the world's best players will play in an international tournament since 2016. Canada faces Sweden in the first game. All right, thank you for sharing your time with us on this Wednesday. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Omar is here later tonight, but first your local CTV News is coming up, and we'll see you tomorrow, we hope. Have a nice evening, stay safe. If you're living in that snow zone, drive safely. Bye-bye.